Good morning and welcome to the National Archives. The exhibit, as Adrienne mentioned, is called Big, and it is a celebration of our 75th anniversary. And it's really just a big grab bag of great stuff about our nation's history. Each of the 26 items here has its own story to tell. There's the Articles of Confederation, which was the nation's first constitution, drafted during the Revolutionary War, literally in the heat of battle, and it carried the former colonies all through that war and up until 1789, when the present Constitution went into effect. We showed it here as it has never been seen before, unrolled, all 13.5 feet of it. An enormous map of Gettysburg, which was the site of the Civil War battle that remains to this day one of the deadliest ever fought in North America. This map is so detailed, it shows the terrain, topography, roads, fences, houses, and what they were made of, and who lived in them. It was used as a base for 3 maps showing troop movements for each of the 3 days of the battle. And it has helped give historians a clearer picture of what happened there. The map is made up of 20 pieces, and fully assembled, it is 13 feet by 13 feet. The National Archives preserves the personnel files for those who have served in the nation's military, and this exhibit has one of the biggest of those files. It belongs to General Douglas MacArthur, fills 9 boxes, documenting the career of one of the most highly decorated soldiers in the history of our military. But this exhibit has some lighter moments as well. We have a document about President William Howard Taft, who was almost certainly our biggest president, and we've got a replica of a bathtub that is built to the exact dimensions of one that was built for him. We've got a shoe belonging to a great powerhouse of an American athlete, and its size will amaze you. And finally, we've got the first printing of the Declaration of Independence, made during the night of July 4th, a big, bold, brash statement embodying an idea so big it engendered the birth of this nation and has nourished the spirits of people in this country and all around the world for more than 2 centuries. It is one of the National Archives' greatest treasures. We call this exhibit Big, but what's really big is the American spirit and the American story. This exhibit has pieces of that story where we can see the challenges have been made and the sacrifices that have been made, the energy, the exuberance, and the humor. These are the things that have sustained us through the centuries and will continue to sustain us in the future. And that's really what the exhibit is all about, helping people to connect with that history. Before we go and actually see the exhibit, I'd like to introduce a guest who's with us today who has a special connection to the National Archives. One of the items on display is the cast of a dinosaur track more than 200 million years old. Dr. Paul Olson is one of the nation's foremost paleontologists. He's a professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University, and he was recently elected a member of the National Academy of Sciences. And we're very happy that he's here with us this morning to talk to us about that dinosaur track. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure it is to be here today and to be invited to participate in this wonderful exhibit. I was 15 years old when I first came across these footprints with a friend of mine, Tony Lessa, who was also in high school with me. And like so many people, I've managed to do a pretty clean wipe of my high school years from my memory. So in fact, when I got called by the National Archives and asked about this, about the footprint, I actually had no memory of having given the footprint, a cast of the footprint, to Richard Nixon, which is what actually happened. The footprint was found in an abandoned quarry that was used for fill. And there were so many footprints that we found, over 1,000 of them over the years, that we tried to have the park donated, have the land donated as a park, which it ultimately was. And in the process, after the park was formed, we received a presidential commendation from Richard Nixon. In return for that, we sent Nixon a cast, which I made out of fiberglass, of the actual footprint. Now, I had completely forgotten about this event. So when I was called by the National Archives, I had to really look into my memory to find the traces of what actually happened. So this footprint is not very big. It's smaller than than the giant shoe that you'll see on display. It's only about this big, and that's not really very big for a dinosaur footprint. If you think about things like Brontosaurus, which has a foot about like this, or Tyrannosaurus rex, which has a foot about the same size. However, that foot that made that footprint was one of the first large dinosaurs that existed after a mass extinction that happened 200 million years ago, when the dinosaurs really took off after their competitors were wiped out. So within a few million years, they did attain the very, very large size that we're familiar with most dinosaurs. Now, that footprint may not be very large, but for a kid who was 15 years old, finding a fossil like that and then having communication with the president and receiving a commendation and sending it off and ultimately having it be in the National Archives here, that was a really big event. Thank you.
The format is that it's made out of, it's written on parchment. It's what we call engrossed, which means to handwrite in a clear, bold handwriting, and on 6 pages of parchment that are then stitched together. And so the top, beginning of the document's up here, and 13.5 feet away are the signatures. And please, come on. I mean, you can feel free to walk on it. The map on the floor here are actually life-size facsimiles of the actual map. But we do have an original portion here on the wall. This particular square, you can see the site where President Lincoln later delivered the Gettysburg Address. There was one civilian casualty in the battle, and her name was Jenny Wade. She was actually killed by a Confederate bullet that came into a house. She was in the house baking bread for the Union Army, and she was at a bullet came in and killed her. And that house is roughly in this area here.
And the address was at the Evergreen?
Well, you can see that there was a cemetery, Evergreen Cemetery, and President Lincoln delivered the address somewhere in this general vicinity right there. This item is a map of Southeast Asia. It's made in 1992. It was made for and presented, you can see in this video back here. There's the map right there. It's called a cluster analysis map, and there are 928 flags in here. Each one of them represents the sighting of an American serviceman who was still missing after the end of the war. And the Senate committee was looking into kind of solve this mystery that tormented, the families of people who served in the war and didn't come back. And so each of these pins represents a sighting of one of those men, and they are coded by the decade in which they were seen. This is actually the radar plot that shows, you can see it was taken from the island of Oahu. The date is December 7th, 1941. So what it reflects is the incoming wave of Japanese planes that are about to attack at Pearl Harbor. And this was plotted by 2 young privates who were on duty at the radar station. And they had a very quiet shift that morning, and they were getting ready to leave, but they thought they'd take a little bit of extra time and kind of get a little more practice. And all of a sudden they saw this huge blip on the radar screen, and they called in where they were supposed to call in, and the person on duty there, it was a quiet Sunday morning, so he also did not have very much experience. And he said, oh, well, don't worry, we're expecting a flight of B-17s to be coming in from San Francisco. And so it was only later when they got back to their camp and saw smoke rising and people running all over the place that they realized that what they had actually seen on the radar screen and what they plotted here was the first wave of Japanese planes on their way to attack. Douglas MacArthur, whose career went almost half a century, and these are the actual boxes. His record fills all of these boxes. So it's thousands and thousands of pages chronicling really quite an extraordinary career, and we've pulled out some highlights from that. We have photographs from various times in his career, and he was one of the most highly decorated people who ever served in the military, and this is a list of some of the honors that he received. In 1951, he was famously relieved of his duties by President Truman, and this is the telegram that conveys that information. And then finally, we have a casualty report reporting his death in 1964 at the age of 84. Okay, so why the bathtub? This bathtub is actually a replica, but what is authentic here is this original document relates to William Howard Taft, who is shown here almost life-size, so he was certainly one of our biggest presidents. And in 1908, he was president-elect, and he was planning a trip to the Panama Canal Zone to inspect the construction site. And the ship's captain thought that he needed to outfit the ship with certain special things for this president. And he ordered, for example, a bedstead of extra length, a superior spring mattress extra long, and a bathtub of extra width. And so this is a replica that we had made, built to the exact dimensions of a bathtub that was later made for President Taft and brought into the White House. So it was described as having pond-like dimensions. And what's interesting about this is that you'll notice there are only two names at the bottom of the document. There's John Hancock, who was President of Congress, and Charles Thompson, who at the time was serving as Secretary. And the reason for that is that it was considered too dangerous at that time for the names of the signers to actually become public. And this is just a reminder that in signing the document, it was really an act of treason, punishable by death. And so the names of the other signers weren't really made public until several months later, when the war started going a little bit better for the American side. The members of Congress agreed to the text of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, and it actually wasn't signed until early August. That's when the signing began. Because what happened, the Declaration of Independence that's in the rotunda is the official engrossed. We call it an engrossed copy. And that was had to be prepared, and it wasn't ready for signature until early August. And so, I mean, that is actually one of the most widely held misconceptions. But what's significant about July 4th is that is the day that Congress agreed to the Declaration of Independence. This is a ship that was originally a German ship, luxury liner. And during World War I, it was seized by the United States, and it was converted into a troop transport and served as a troop transport through the years of World War I. Then at the end of the war, it was again converted back into a luxury liner. And so this drawing articulates that conversion exactly. It was kind of a proposal as to how that change would be made. These are actually design drawings for the Elephant House in the National Zoo here in Washington. And in the Elephant House, there's a relief design, and these animals are prehistoric animals. Maybe Dr. Olson could tell us a little bit about them. But they are all shown, and these are drawings in which they were shown later in these aluminum relief sculptures. And if you go to the Elephant House today, you can see them. Just a few words about this globe. It's from 1969. It was a gift to the National Archives, and it posed huge storage problems. So this exhibit really gave us an opportunity to restore it to its condition, which is now beautiful. It's illuminated.